Okay, good morning. So we're working through Shin Chof Gimel. Today, interesting things. We're talking about Tfilas Kelim on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and then we're talking about washing up on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Are you allowed to do it? How can you do it? Other related halachas. So it says the Mechaber in Shin Chof Gimel Seif Hey. Hamevi kadayayin memokum lemokum. If you're bringing jugs of wine, barrels of wine from one place to another, lo yaviem besal of a kupa b'derech chol. Don't bring them in a basket or in a box or something k'derech chol like you would do during the week. Ele yaviem lefonov ayal kaseifa v'chayetzi b'zeh sheishanim b'derech chol, because it's uvdin d'chol. It looks like you're doing a weekday activity, and therefore don't just bring them in a box like you would do during the week, but instead put it on your shoulder. Or some sort of shinui. Even if the shinui doesn't make it easier to carry, in fact it might make it harder, still we want to avoid uvda d'chol. And if you can't change the way you normally do it, and you can't help it, you need to bring quite a lot of many bottles of wine to the Suda, and the only way to do it is bring a whole box, then mutter. And others say no, that Memayat Behiluch is better, and better to bring a box of wine with 12 bottles in it rather than go back a few times to bring a smaller amount each time. And better to put the dozen bottles of wine in one box rather than go backwards and forwards loads of times. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Lo Yaviem, Litin Shleisha V'Arba Kadim B'Toich Kupa L'Soim. To put 3 or 4 jugs or barrels of wine in a box and bring them, mishum denira kamaisa dechol loses masois. Because if you're carrying many barrels or jugs or bottles of wine in a basket or in a box, it looks like uvda dechol, and therefore it's not allowed. Interestingly, in footnote 16, he says that he brings a Shulchan Aruch Harav, who says another reason, and that is zilzul Shabbos. Not uvda d'chol, but zilzul Shabbos is cheapening Shabbos. It's it's a zilzul of Shabbos. Lefonov, so you bring it, you put it on your shoulders. Lefonov biyodai, that means in your hand. Oyal ksefoi echad eshnaim, you put 1 or 2 on your shoulders. The muchach l'sarei Shabbos, so people will realize you're carrying it the same Shabbos.
Is this only wine or?
Yeah, whatever you would need.
Drinks?
Yeah.
And if you're bringing storing from upstairs.
No,
upstairs,
it's
you can put in a box.
Yeah, mistama. That would be. It looks like you're schlepping, but with Sfarim you're doing. Why you bring so many Sfarim? You just need a lot of Sfarim.
Sidurim, whatever.
Yeah, but he says here, but if it's for Litzarech, for a mitzvah or something, maybe then it'll be different. Maybe if it's if you've got Orachim, he says. Okay, try and deviate a little bit from the way you would do it during the week, so it shouldn't be uvda d'chol. Okay. Others say that if you can take one trip and you just bring all the barrels of wine in one go, that's better than going backwards and forwards many times.
Surely you must be talking about outdoors. I mean, if somebody brings something to the house, rather than...
you always preempt exactly what the Mishnah says. Ayin Simon Tov Kufyud Sif Ches Ba'agod. The pasuk Hayesher Ma'elu V'chol Zeh Makom She'ein Royen. But K'shneisem Derech Maveh HaMereves, you're walking in the street or where there's other people. The Shkichi Barabim Va'av Shemilsa Tuva V'yem L'Tzarech Cholim V'yem L'Kula Alman L'Mayat B'Masa Odif. There, it's if you're going backwards and forwards countless times, it looks a little bit of the d'chol, and therefore everyone would agree l'mayat b'masa l'mayat b'masa is odd. For you to walk even once, I was the other way around. For you to walk even once with a big box of something through the streets, it looks a little bit of the d'chol, and better to walk many times with 1 or 2 bottles each time, because to avoid that if you're walking in the public like that. Okay, Beseda, let's go weiter. So this is a very important sif coming up, Shin Chof Gimel Sif Vav, talking about washing kelim on Shabbos, washing up and things like that. So Madichim kelim l'tzorech hayom. You're allowed to wash kelim l'tzorech hayom. Kagoyin shenishalo adayin sudalechel. So for example, on Friday night, a person's only got a few kelim, or they've had a big crowd on Friday night, and they need to wash up the kelim for Shabbos day, so they're allowed to. But once, if you're using these kelim for shalashudas, then ein madichin. Then you can't wash up, because once shalashudas, what are you needing them for? That's clearly l'tzorech motzei Shabbos, and that's not allowed. Or kli shasiyah madichin kol hayom shekol hayom roi l'shtiyah. However, for drinking glasses, which you would need more regularly, then you're allowed to wash them up the whole day, because you could all, even though you may have finished Shabbos, you'd still use them. There's always be room to use them further, and therefore you're allowed to rinse them. Okay, let's look at the detail. Madichim, says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkot and Chavov, afilu esek kaisus, even if it's 10 cups, ve'ein tzorech ela la'achas r'shai ladiach kulon. V'tohayav v'roi lo l'kol echad v'echad tiru kulon. So that's the important klal. So say, for example, you had a big crowd on Friday night, and there's just a few, smaller number on Shabbos day. So you could actually wash up all of them, even though you only need, say, 4 or 6 or whatever of kalim, and even though you had 15 people, 20 people on Friday night, you're allowed to wash all of them, because each one, is royal to use today. And so too, making beds. If you want to put some sheets on a bed, you can do all the beds in the house, because each one is royal that I could sleep in this one. If you look at 21, an interesting note. Now, what if you've got other kalim, right? So you've got other kalim in the cupboard. Let's say you've got your dinner service of 18 kalim, and you had 12 people there. So and you're only 6 for Shabbos lunch. Can you wash up the ones that you use Friday night, or do you have to use the ones that are unused in your cupboard? So v'im b'shusa kelim acherim sheyochel lishtamish bohem gam im lo yadech ezele kos b'shar shuv shevet levi she'af b'zeh minaka elim lo diach es kol hakelim hamluchlachim. You still got other kelim to use, but still, says the Shevet HaLevi, the minhag is you're allowed to wash the dirty dishes. But there is room to be machmir, to avoid the washing up, if you've got other clean kelim. That's inferred from the Tosfos in Shabbos. So if you have got other kelim, it's best to avoid, but technically it would be allowed. Okay, let's go weiter in the Mishnah Berurah. Chav Zayin, l'tzorech hayom. Hainu, afilu b'leil Shabbos mutar l'diach l'tzorech mocha l'tzorech suda shlishis. So again, you're on Friday night after you finished eating, you want to wash up for the next day. That would be okay. Kagoyin shen nishar. So you've still got another suda to go. V'im yodeh shelo yitztarech oid le'elu kelim. But you know full well that you're not going to need these kelim. Then asal adich mishum teirach. Then you're not allowed to, because it's a tirchi yaseira. Or lehepach im yodeh sheyitztarech lahen. Or alternative, if you know you will need them, so for example, in the summer, long summer, you could have shalosh shudas. I often have shalosh shudas, it's like lunchtime. I go to Ashkam, I wash in the morning, and then by the time we do lunch, it's already after Chatzos, and so then you can be finished shalosh shudas at 3 o'clock. But Motzei Shabbos can go out at 10 or 10:30 in London here. So it could be that you've had shalosh shudas. It's not a din in shalosh shudas. It could be that you're going to use them again later on. Then it would be mutar. So the whole question is whether you need them again on Shabbos. That's really the issue, and then that would be allowed. Okay, v'chol hayom im barla shelo yishta shuv also ladiach hakos. Then it would not be allowed even for kosos. So if you go back at 22, an interesting point. Kelim hamunachim ba'ofen shel bizoyin l'Shabbos. Say, for example, you had a big crowd Friday night, and your kitchen sink is stacked up with dirty dishes. And sometimes for the guy, he's less bothered about it, but for one's wife, she is bothered about it. Or maybe even you are bothered about it. So v'kelim hamunachim ba'ofen shel bizoyin l'Shabbos, and it's a bizoyin l'Shabbos in yamdu kach b'lo hadocha. If you leave it like that without hadocha, kosav le'el in hatzos hamitzah. You can't properly make the bed on Motzei Shabbos. You can put the duvet back on the bed, that's okay. But if it's a bizoyin for Shabbos, your bed is totally unmade, and then mutzah, so you're allowed to make it on Shabbos. Because it's not a question of doing it for Motzei Shabbos, it's a tzorech for now. I don't want the bed to be unkempt now. If a person sees that it's a lack of cleanliness, it's just a balagan. It could get, it can give a bad odor, or you get insects coming because of the dirt. You're embarrassed. People with guests or friends come into the kitchen and they see it's all, it's a bit of a balagan. But they see dirty kelim. shemutel adicha mishum hashadov nechshav tzarech Shabbos. Okay, so that's a very important klal. So if you've got a sink full of dirty dishes on Shabbos, generally speaking, if there's no need for those kelim, you shouldn't really wash them up. However, if they're going to cause you a bit of distress because it's it disturbs you that there's so many kelim unclean. Yeah, so some say you should just cover it, but some say, I know what's under the tea cloth and it disturbs, or you're more embarrassed for guests or things like that. Then it would be, the Shlomo Zalman says it would be okay. So let me just summarize washing kelim on Shabbos. So just as a pointer, he's not talking about the halachas of schita. So in terms of schita, you can't use a sponge to wash up. You can't use hot water. That's a separate issue. That's well known. Using cold water with synthetic scrubs and things like that would be okay. So what we're talking about here is washing up as a problem of hachana or uvda dechal or tirchi yaseira. These are the issues over here, and therefore the halacha is if you need the kelim again for another Shabbos meal, then you're allowed to wash up in a hetadika way. If, however, it's no need for Shabbos, let's say it's for Shalosh Shudas to wash them up on late Shabbos afternoon, for what? For Motzei Shabbos, that's not allowed. That's unnecessary. If, however, it's going to disturb a person because it just disturbs the dirty kelim for the rest of Shabbos, or it will cause a residue and it will attract fleas or ants or something like that, or it gives a bad odor, then there will be grounds to do it. Interestingly, he's got in Simcha Bunim Chaim, he talks about this, and he says a very interesting thing. He says that rinsing and soaking, so just as washing dishes, properly washing them, cleaning them properly is prohibited, so too it's forbidden to rinse even lightly when the dish is no longer needed. That's what we've established from this sif. He says there is an opinion that one is permitted to rinse dishes that contain soft food particles or grease to prevent the residue from hardening and becoming difficult to wash. Now that's quite motzu. So say Shabbos lunch, you've got loads of dirty plates, they've got little bits and particles, and if you leave them until, let's say even to Motzei Shabbos or even till Sunday morning to clean them up, they're going to get very hard and very difficult to wash. So there is an opinion which says that you're allowed to just rinse it on Shabbos just to make it easier. However, most authorities disagree with this view and rule that rinsing is forbidden even for this purpose. Nevertheless, two useful heter. A lot of people don't know this. Two permissible methods of ensuring that the residue does not harden. Number one, when one may leave a pan of soapy water in the sink before Shabbos and stack the dishes in that pan. That's a very useful hack. So imagine you've got a very big chicken soup pot, or just a basin, or like an insert into the sink, and you just put a bit of soapy water there before Shabbos to put the dirty kelim in there, and memela, the hard particles will sort of loosen up or fall away. That's one eitzah. Another eitzah is one may stack dirty dishes in the sink and wash your hands over the sink, allowing the water to flow over the dishes. That's if in a situation where you don't need the kelim anymore on Shabbos, there's no head to wash up, but you're worried about the residue sticking to the thing, so you can wash your hands over the dirty kelim. That's the second heter. Say it up.